Yeah, I think you would understand any presentation using the word EBITDA if every time you saw that word, you just substituted the phrase bullshit earnings. Everybody wants fiscal virtue, but not quite yet. They're like that guy who felt that way about sex. He was willing to give it up, but not quite yet. Well, you don't want to be like the motion picture executive in California, and they said the funeral was so large because everybody wanted to make sure he was dead. It was investment banker-aided fraud.
Yeah.
Not exactly novel.
That does not mean we approve of every buyback at all, though. I mean, we've seen...
No. I think some people just buy it to keep the stock up, and that, of course, is insane and immoral. But apart from that, it's fine.
Charlie's big on lowering expectations.
Absolutely. That's the way I got married. My wife lowered her expectations. The general system for money management requires people to pretend that they can do something that they can't do and to pretend to like it when they really don't. I think that's a terrible way to spend your life, but it's very well paid. And yet it's perfectly obvious, at least to me, that to say that derivative accounting in America is a sewer is an insult to sewage. If you take the modern world, where people are trying to teach you how to come in and trade actively in stocks, well, I regard that as roughly equivalent to trying to induce a bunch of young people to start off on heroin. It is really stupid. And when you're already rich, to make your money by encouraging people to get rich by trading. And then there are people on the TV, another wonderful place, and they say, I have this book that will teach you how to make 300% a year. And all you have to do is pay for shipping, and I will mail it to you. How likely is it that a person who had suddenly found a way to make 300% a year would be trying to sell books on the internet to you? And it's ridiculous. Let me tell you another story that I think is an interesting one about the modern life. But this goes back to a different time. And this man has this wonderful horse. And it's just a marvelous horse. It's got an easy gait and good looking and everything. It just works wonderfully. But also occasionally just gets so he's dangerous and vicious and causes enormous damage and trouble and breaks arms and legs for his rider and so on. And he goes to the vet and says, what can I do about this horse? And the vet says, that's a very easy problem and I'm glad to help you. He says, what should I do? And the man says, the next time your horse is behaving well, sell it. Well, think of how immoral that is. And haven't I just described what private equity has to do? When private equity has to sell something that's really troublesome, they hire an investment banker. And what does the investment banker do? He makes a projection. You can't, I have never seen such expertise in my whole life as is created in making projections in investment banking. There is no business so lousy it can't get a wonderful projection. But is that a great way to make a living, to have phony projections and use it to make money out of people you look right into the eyes of? I would say no. And by and large, Warren and I, we never tried to make money out of stupidity of our dumb buyers. We tried to make money by buying. And if we were selling horse shit, we didn't want to pretend it was a cure for arthritis. And I think it's better to go through life our way instead of theirs. My father had this best friend and client. And he also had this other client who was a big blowhard. And he was always working for the big blowhard, and he wasn't ever working for his wonderful client whom I admired. And I said, why do you do this? And he said, Charlie, you idiot. He says, the big blowhard is an endless source of legal troubles. He's always in trouble, overreaching and misbehaving and so forth. Whereas Grant McFadden treats everybody right, the employees, the customers, everything. And he gets involved with some psychotic, he walks over there and makes a graceful exit immediately. So a man like that doesn't need a lawyer. And my father was trying to teach me something, and it really worked. I spent my whole life trying to be like Grant McFadden. And I want to tell you, it works. It really works. Peter Coffin is always telling me if the crooks only knew how much money you could make by being honest, they'd all behave differently. Here's an apocryphal story that is very instructive. A young man comes to visit Mozart. And he says, Mozart, he says, I want to write symphonies. And Mozart says, how old are you? And the man says, I'm 23. And Mozart says, you're too young to write symphonies. And he says, but Mozart, he says, you were writing symphonies when you were 10 years old. And Mozart says, yes, but I wasn't asking other people how to do it. Now there's another Mozart story. Here's the greatest musical talent maybe that ever lived. And what was his life like? Well, he was bitterly unhappy and he died young. That's the life of Mozart. What the hell did Mozart do to screw it up? To make himself, well, he did two things that are guaranteed to create a lot of misery. He overspent his income scrupulously. That's number one. That is really stupid. And the other thing was he was full of jealousies and resentments. If you'll overspend your income and be full of jealousy and resentments, you can have a lousy, unhappy life and die young. All you've got to do is learn from Mozart. You can also learn from that young man who was asking Mozart how to write symphony. The truth of the matter is that not everybody can learn everything. Some people are way the hell better. And of course, no matter how hard you try, there's always some guy that achieves more, some guy or gal. And my answer is, so what? Does any of us need to be the very top of the whole world? It's ridiculous. And another thing that people do that I regard as amazing is they build these enormous mausoleums. I think they figure they want people to walk by that mausoleum and say, gosh, I wish I were in there. The topic I'd like to talk about briefly is common sense.
Which isn't common.
Yes. See? And what people mean when they say a man has common sense is uncommon sense. And usually they don't mean that the man has a narrow little activity he's good at, like knitting sweaters, and he sticks to that. What they mean is a man that can operate over a pretty broad range of human territory without making any big boners. And that is a very important thing to be good at. And the question is how you get it. I was very lucky in my own life because every place I looked, at the pinnacle, there was a guy that was better than I was. And one of my father's best friends was a great surgeon with a vast mechanical ability. And I knew what this man did with his mechanical abilities in inventing all these spreaders and things he used to do his operation, but I would never be as good as he was. And everywhere I looked, there was somebody like that. And there was all this folly out there, and I suddenly realized, if I just avoid all the folly, maybe I can get an advantage without having to be really good at anything. And I kept doing that all my life, and it worked so well that I enjoy sharing it with people like you. Another trick that I got very early was that I loved big ideas that had a lot of instructive power. And I liked them so well that I didn't mind when they were in somebody else's territory. I just went in and took the ideas. So I paid no attention to the territorial boundaries of academic disciplines. And I just grabbed all the big ideas that I could. And then I used them in daily activity to solve problems and amuse myself and do self-education and so forth. Well, that makes me a collector. I'm a collector of inanity. And I've cataloged the inanities on structures in my head. And it's been a wonderful thing to do. If you stop to think about it, how many unhappy collectors do you know? Whether they collect silver or mistresses or, you know, by and large, collectors are happy. And collecting inanities is just wonderful. If you collect stamps the way I once did, I soon had a U.S. stamp collection I couldn't afford to add a stamp to. Well, what fun is collecting when you can't afford the next stamp? When you're collecting inanities, there's never a shortage. And there's all this low-hanging fruit. We had one this morning from the governor of New York.
That was pretty expensive fruit.
Well, but... And so, this is just a wonderful activity, and it's amused me and instructed me all my life. Another idea that I got is that wisdom acquisition was a moral duty. It's not something you do just to advance in life. Wisdom acquisition is a moral duty. And there's a corollary to that proposition, which is very important. It means that you're hooked for lifetime learning. And without lifetime learning, you people are not going to do very well. You are not going to get very far in life based on what you already know. You're going to advance in life by what you're going to learn after you leave here. If you take Berkshire Hathaway, which is certainly one of the best regarded corporations in the world, and it may have the best long-term investment record in the entire history of civilization. The skill that got Berkshire through one decade would not have sufficed to get it through the next decade with the achievements made. Without Warren Buffett being a learning machine, continuous learning machine, the record would have been absolutely impossible. The same is true at lower walks of life. I constantly see people rise in life who were not the smartest, sometimes not even the most diligent, but they are learning machines. They go to bed every night a little wiser than they were when they got up. And boy, does that habit help, particularly when you have a long run ahead of you. It's amazing how much achievement there's been in civilization in these last 200 years, and most of it in the last 100 years. And what happens is, it's really interesting, is with all this enormous increase in living standards and freedom and diminishment of racial inequities and all the huge progress that has come, people are less happy about the state of affairs than they were when things were way tougher. And that has a very simple explanation. The world is not driven by greed, it's driven by envy. The fact that everybody's 5 times better off than they used to be, they take it for granted. All they think about is somebody else having more now, and it's not fair that he should have it and they don't. That's the reason that God came down and told Moses that you couldn't envy your neighbor's wife or even his donkey. It's weird for somebody my age, because I was in the middle of the Great Depression when the hardship was unbelievable. I was safer walking around Omaha in the evening than I am in my own neighborhood in Los Angeles after all this great wealth and so forth. What are the core ideas that have helped me? Well, luckily, I got at a very early age the idea that the safest way to try and get what you want is to try and deserve what you want. It's such a simple idea. It's the golden rule, so to speak. You want to deliver to the world what you would buy if you were on the other end. There is no ethos, in my opinion, that is better for any lawyer or any other person to have. By and large, the people who had this ethos win in life, and they don't win just money, just honors and emoluments. They win the respect the deserved trust of the people they deal with. And there is huge pleasure in life to be obtained from getting deserved trust. Well, that's a wonderful question you've asked, because Warren and I both know some very successful businessmen who have not one true friend on earth, and rightly so.
That's true.
And that is no way to live a life. And if by asking that question, you're asking, how do I get the right friends? You are really onto the right question. And when you get with the right friends, if you've worked hard at becoming the right sort of fellow, I think you'll recognize what you have, and then all you have to do is hang on. The toxic people who are trying to fool you or lie to you, who aren't reliable in meeting their commitments, the great lesson of life is get them the hell out of your life.
Yep.
And do it fast. Do it fast. What will really fail in life? What do we want to avoid? Such an easy answer. Sloth and unreliability. If you're unreliable, it doesn't matter what your virtues are. You're going to crater immediately. So doing what you have faithfully engaged to do should be an automatic part of your conduct. You want to avoid sloth and unreliability. Another thing I think should be avoided is extremely intense ideology, because it cabbages up one's mind. You've seen that. And you see a lot of it, in TV preachers, for instance. They've all got different ideas about theology, and a lot of them have minds that are made of cabbage. But that can happen with political ideology. And if you're young, it's easy to drift into loyalties. And when you announce that you're a loyal member and you start shouting the orthodox ideology out, what you're doing is pounding it in. And you're gradually ruining your mind. So you want to be very, very careful with this ideology. It's a big danger. I have what I call an iron prescription that helps me keep sane when I naturally drift toward preferring one ideology over another. And that is, I say, I'm not entitled to have an opinion on this subject unless I can state the arguments against my position better than the people do who are supporting it. I think only when I've reached that state am I qualified to speak. The game in our kind of life is being able to recognize a good idea when you rarely get it, or where it rarely is presented to you. And I think that's something you have to prepare for over a long period. What is the old saying, that opportunity comes to the prepared mind? And I don't think you can teach people in 2 minutes how to have a prepared mind. But that's the game. Yeah, at a deeper level of generality, if you have a passionate interest in knowing why things are happening, you always are trying to figure out the world in terms of why is this happening or why is this not happening. That cast of mind kept over long periods gradually improves your ability to cope with reality. And if you don't have that cast of mind, I think you're destined probably for failure, even if you've got a pretty high IQ.
Social schedule, you're on Zoom, you have breakfasts and lunch.
Well, I like it that way.
Yeah.
That's my idea of a proper old age for me. And I didn't plan it. It just happened. I am very good at recognizing unfair advantages. And I got unfair advantages in old age the way I got unfair advantages in non-old age. And when they came, I just grabbed them, boom, boom, boom. I basically believe in the soldier-on system. Mm-hmm. Lots of hardship will come, and your you got to handle it well by soldiering through. And a few rare opportunities will come. You got to learn how to recognize them when they come.